A Land Rover became a crematorium that night, with the bride still inside. Annabelle Pratt's remains were so thoroughly incinerated that her father, a tech billionaire who could afford the world's best forensic experts, couldn't recover enough of her to fill an urn. The $500,000 wedding she'd never have became her funeral pyre, meticulously crafted by the very man who once promised her fairy tale perfection. Tristan Ford, the self-proclaimed wedding god of the Hamptons elite, didn't just plan ceremonies, believed he controlled destinies. And when Annabelle dared to cancel his masterpiece, his god complex demanded sacrifice. The propane explosion that followed wasn't an accident. It was divine retribution in the mind of a monster who learned judgment from his father's pulpit and delivered it with a match and kerosene. Welcome to True Crime Inquiry, where we dissect the darkest chapters of human behavior. For our returning subscribers, thank you for continuing this journey with us. To those joining for the first time, prepare yourself, this isn't just another wedding gone wrong. Today, we unravel how luxury and privilege collided with narcissism and religious delusion in the Hamptons, where wedding planner Tristan Ford transformed from celebrated artist to calculated killer. This story exposes the thin veneer between service and servitude, between admiration and obsession. As we explore the 5 acts of this tragedy, you'll witness how a man who crafted perfect beginnings for countless couples engineered the most horrific ending imaginable when his ego was threatened. Tristan Ford didn't walk into rooms, she transformed them. At 37, his slender frame had become as recognizable in the Hamptons as the ocean horizon. When Tristan plans your wedding, socialite Vanessa Kensington once told Vogue, "You're not hiring a planner. You're commissioning an artist who happens to work in white tulle instead of oil paints." His portfolio read like a who's who of American aristocracy. Tech moguls, Wall Street titans, third-generation political dynasties. His waiting list stretched 2 years, and his starting price, $250,000, was merely the entrance fee to his kingdom of perfectionism. Tristan didn't just coordinate events, he orchestrated emotional symphonies. He controlled every element. The precise shade of blush in the peonies, the exact temperature of champagne service, the geometric precision of place settings. He frequently reminded clients that perfection isn't achieved through compromise. During their initial consultation at his Southampton office, a converted boathouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlantic. "You came to me because you want extraordinary. Extraordinary requires surrender." He'll tell them. Most clients did surrender, hypnotized by the portfolio of celebrity weddings displayed on his custom-designed silver iPad. Those who questioned his vision quickly found themselves politely dismissed from his client list. "I don't design weddings for the indecisive," he once told The New Yorker. "I create experiences for those brave enough to trust divinity." This god complex wasn't metaphorical to those who worked under him. 3 former assistants had filed workplace harassment suits, all settled quietly with ironclad NDAs. His current Team 5 young design school graduates worked 80-hour weeks, surviving on protein bars and fear. They called themselves Ford's disciples, in private group chats, documenting his explosive tantrums and impossible demands. But 18 months before Annabelle Pratt's murder, Tristan's immaculate reputation acquired its first smudge. Bridal designer Eliza Chen publicly accused him of plagiarizing her exclusive tablescape design for a Vanderbilt wedding. The evidence was damning identical, hand-painted Portuguese chargers, custom-dyed napkins in a proprietary shade of cerulean, and distinctive bronze olive branch place cardholders. The scandal rippled through the luxury wedding industry. 3 high-profile clients quietly moved their business elsewhere. His Instagram following dropped by 20,000. For the first time, Tristan appeared vulnerable, mortal. Then came Annabelle Pratt, daughter of Marcus Pratt, founder of Pratt Technologies. Fresh from Stanford with degrees in computer science and art history, the 26-year-old heiress represented everything Tristan needed. New money eager for old-world legitimacy, a bride with impeccable taste but malleable vision, and most importantly, a $500,000 budget with potential for expansion. What Tristan couldn't see was that Annabelle represented something far more dangerous than salvation. She was the trigger that would expose the fault lines in his psyche, precise point where ambition, entitlement, and delusion would collapse into something monstrous. No one, not even his closest associates, understood how deep that monstrosity ran. Not yet. To understand the inferno that consumed Annabel Pratt, you must first understand the flames that forged Tristan Ford. Long before he curated luxury weddings for the elite, Tristan Matthews would legally change his surname at 19, spent his Sundays in the third pew of Covenant Baptist Church in rural Georgia, watching his father transform behind the pulpit. Reverend Elijah Matthews was known for sermons that made congregants tremble. His specialty was damnation-vivid descriptions of hellfire, awaiting those who defied divine authority. My father didn't just describe hell. Tristan once confided to an assistant during a rare vulnerable moment. He made you smell the brimstone. The Reverend's authority didn't end at the church doors. At home, infractions as minor as an unkempt bedroom or homework completed with insufficient attention resulted in hours kneeling on uncooked rice while reciting scripture. His mother, Caroline, a former music teacher, retreated into prescription medications, and Bach concertos played on their out-of-tune upright piano. Childhood friends remember Tristan as meticulously dressed even then, his shirts always precisely ironed, shoelaces perfectly aligned. Even at 10, he seemed to believe appearance could save him. While his peers were playing in mud, he was arranging matchbox cars by color gradient. At 16, Tristan discovered his father's secret. Reverend Matthews had been embezzling church renovation funds to support a mistress in the next county. Rather than expose him, Tristan leveraged this knowledge, negotiating his freedom-bounding tuition for Rhode Island School of Design and his mother's liberation through divorce proceedings. The day he left for college, he told his father, "You taught me my most valuable lesson. Those who claim to speak for God are usually serving themselves." Dr. Eleanor Weiss, forensic psychiatrist who later evaluated Tristan, would identify this moment as pivotal. He didn't reject his father's worldview, she testified. He secularized it. Divine judgment became aesthetic judgment. The power to condemn became the power to critique. The pulpit became the design table. At RISD, professors noted his exceptional talent paired with unsettling perfectionism. One instructor wrote, "Ford creates beauty but cannot tolerate the human imperfections of collaboration." Another observed, "He doesn't design spaces. He creates totalitarian aesthetic regimes where every element must submit to his vision." After graduation, Tristan interned with 3 prominent event planners before launching his own brand at 27. His first major client secured through a college connection was a Johnson & Johnson heiress. Her wedding reception made the cover of Town and Country, launching his career into the stratosphere. As his reputation grew, so did his God complex. Staff reported him standing silently in completed reception spaces before guests arrived. Arms outstretched like a conductor before an orchestra, a messiah blessing disciples. "It's perfect because I have willed it so," he would whisper. What no one realized was that beneath Tristan's cultivated exterior, his father's fire and brimstone theology had never died. It had merely transformed into something more insidious, a belief that those who defied his vision weren't merely wrong, they were heretics deserving punishment. For 6 months, Tristan sculpted Annabel Pratt's wedding with obsessive precision. This wasn't merely a $500,000 ceremony, it was his redemption narrative made manifest in silk and silver. The venue, a 19th-century limestone mansion overlooking Montauk's jagged coastline, would be transformed into what Tristan called a cathedral of modern romance. His design concept, ethereal antiquity, merged classical architecture with cutting-edge technology and organic elements. Every detail reflected Tristan's dual obsessions with control and transcendence. 300 brass lanterns would be suspended at mathematically calculated heights, creating what he termed a constellation of earthbound stars. A custom fragrance cenotes of sea salt, white tea, and sandalwood would be diffused through hidden atomizers. The table linens required 14 attempts before the textile artist achieved the precise shade of oyster white Tristan demanded. The flowers alone consumed $95,000 of the budget. Imported peonies from New Zealand, rare orchids from Ecuador, and heritage roses cultivated specifically for this occasion. When Annabel gently suggested scaling back, Tristan dismissed her concern with practiced charm. "Your guests won't remember what they ate, but they'll remember how the space made them feel. I'm not creating a wedding. I'm creating a sensory memory that will sustain your marriage through its darkest moments." What Tristan couldn't control was Annabelle herself. Behind her polite smiles and Pinterest boards, she harbored growing doubts not about her fiancé, investment banker James Holloway, but about the spectacle their union was becoming. The wedding started feeling like performance art. Anna kept saying the event was becoming disconnected from their actual relationship. 3 months before the wedding date, Annabelle and James took a weekend trip to Maine. In a rustic seaside inn with peeling wallpaper and spectacular ocean views, they made a decision that would ultimately cost Annabelle her life. They would elope. The email arrived in Tristan's inbox on a Tuesday morning. "We've decided to pursue a more intimate ceremony that better reflects our values. We're grateful for your extraordinary vision and work, and of course expect to honor our contract financially." Staff described Tristan's reaction as eerily calm. He read the email twice, closed his laptop, and walked into his private office without a word. Inside, however, something fundamental shattered. According to his assistant Maya, who overheard through the door, Tristan spent 20 minutes repeating a single phrase: "You don't leave the cathedral before communion." That evening, he called Annabelle direct, something he rarely did with clients, preferring communication through his team. His voice remained professionally measured as he requested a final meeting to arrange the return of her deposits and personal items accumulated during the planning process. What Maya later described as terrifying was how meticulously Tristan continued working. That week, finalizing cancelled vendor contracts, organizing refunds, and documenting every element of the aborted wedding. Only once did his mask slip when he told his floral designer, "Some brides simply don't deserve the beauty we create for them." No one recognized this comment for what it truly was: not a philosophical lament, but a death sentence being contemplated in real time. On the 17th of October, the autumn air carried a slight chill as Annabelle Pratt drove her 2023 Land Rover Defender toward an industrial complex 30 miles outside Southampton. The warehouser converted textile mill Tristan occasionally used for client storage sat, isolated among overgrown fields. The meeting was scheduled for 7:30 p.m., unusually late, but Tristan had insisted the timing was necessary due to his packed schedule. Text messages recovered from Annabelle's phone revealed her slight hesitation. "Isn't there somewhere more convenient we could meet?" she'd written. Tristan's response was a masterclass in manipulation. "I've arranged everything perfectly, including the remaining deposits in cash as you requested. I've also gathered all your personal items and mood boards. It would be tremendously helpful if you could come to me just this once." "Always considerate, even in cancellation," Annabelle agreed. She told her fiancé she'd be back by 9 p.m. for their dinner reservation. James later testified that her last words as she left their Bridgehampton rental were, "I just want to close this chapter cleanly." Security footage from a neighboring property captured Annabelle's vehicle arriving at 7:24 p.m. Tristan's Mercedes was already parked near the building's side entrance. For 18 minutes, nothing appeared to happen. Then, at 7:42 p.m., exterior cameras recorded a sudden flash of light from inside the warehouse, followed by Tristan emerging alone through a rear door. What transpired inside represents the darkest intersection of privilege, delusion, and rage. According to the prosecutor's reconstruction, supported by forensic evidence that survived the subsequent fire, Tristan had prepared meticulously. The warehouse floor had been arranged like an altar, Annabelle's cancelled wedding elements displayed with museum-like precision. Her sample centerpiece, fabric swatches, even the custom-designed champagne coupes created for her first toast. When Annabelle entered, witnesses in adjacent buildings reported hearing raised voices. One described a man shouting something that sounded almost religious, though specific words were indistinguishable. Prosecutors believe Tristan first attempted to shame Annabelle, forcing her to witness the desecration of his creative vision. When emotional manipulation failed, Tristan revealed his true purpose. Using a stun gun purchased 3 weeks earlier through a prepaid credit card, he incapacitated Annabelle long enough to secure her with zip ties to the driver's seat of her own vehicle, which he had already positioned inside the warehouse. The most chilling evidence came from Annabelle's smartwatch, which recorded an elevated heart rate for approximately 12 minutes before all biometric data ceased. During this time, Tristan circled her vehicle, methodically splashing it with kerosene while delivering what he likely viewed as his final sermon. "I built you a kingdom," he reportedly told her. "Now you'll burn in it." The fire spread precisely as Tristan planned, igniting the Land Rover's fuel tank. What he hadn't anticipated was the explosion of a nearby propane tank used for warehouse heating. The resulting conflagration nearly consumed the evidence of his meticulous planning and nearly provided his escape. As flames engulfed the building, Tristan walked unhurriedly to his car, drove to a local bar, and ordered a 16-year-old Lagavulin neat. The wedding god believed he had performed his perfect final ceremony judgment, delivered against the bride who had dared to reject his divine vision. Arrogance has toppled empires and kings throughout history, but rarely has it unraveled a criminal so completely as it did Tristan Ford. The fire that consumed Annabelle Pratt and the warehouse was declared an accident by the first responding officers, a tragic car fire that spread to a commercial building. The intense heat had reduced most evidence to ash, including 78% of Annabelle's remains. Her dental records provided the only confirmation of her identity. Tristan might have escaped justice entirely, if not for a single, catastrophic miscalculation: his need for an audience. At Montauk's Harbour Lounge, bartender Caitlin Reese noticed the usually immaculate wedding planner's disheveled appearances, bespoke shirt bearing a faint smell of smoke, his hand slightly trembling around his whiskey glass. He seemed almost euphoric. Not drunk, but high on something else entirely. When she mentioned seeing smoke in the distance, Tristan smiled in a way that made her instinctively step back. "Some brides only deserve pyres," he murmured, swirling his Lagavulin. Tonight, perfection was finally achieved. Reese immediately contacted her cousin, Suffolk County Detective Maria Vasquez, who connected Tristan's cryptic statement to the warehouse fire reported just 40 minutes earlier. Within hours, investigators discovered Tristan's Mercedes on traffic cameras, leaving the scene precisely when the fire began. The case built methodically from there. Forensic technicians recovered fragments of zip ties with Annabelle's DNA. Tristan's phone contained detailed maps of the warehouse interior. Most damning was the discovery of kerosene residue in the trunk of his Mercedes and a stun gun hidden behind a false panel in his office desk. The trial captivated America for 9 weeks. Prosecution and defense battled over Tristan's mental state, with 3 psychiatric experts offering competing narratives about his culpability. Defense attorneys portrayed him as a man suffering from delusional disorder, his judgment warped by his father's religious abuse. Prosecutors painted a portrait of narcissistic entitlement man who viewed clients as possessions rather than people. The most riveting testimony came from Maya Chen, Tristan's assistant, who revealed his chilling words upon learning of the cancellation. "A cathedral demands sacrifice. Without it, there is no sanctification." She described watching him methodically research Annabelle's schedule in the days before the murder, noting when she would be alone. After just 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances of premeditation and extreme cruelty. As the judge sentenced him to life without parole, Tristan remained unnervingly serene. His only statement to the court revealed the depth of his delusion. "I gave her immortality. Without me, she would have faded into domestic obscurity. Now she'll be remembered forever." Marcus Pratt, Annabelle's father, responded with quiet dignity. "My daughter didn't need your brand of immortality. She simply wanted to marry the man she loved without your spectacle. Your so-called immortality was just your own desperate grasp for relevance, and it cost a brilliant young woman her future." The ashes of Tristan Ford's ambition still haunt the Hamptons wedding industry. Today, his name is whispered as a cautionary tale, a reminder that beneath the glossy veneer of luxury lies the dangerous potential for obsession. Tristan now resides in a maximum security cell, where he spends his days sketching elaborate wedding designs that will never see creation. Prison officials report he still refers to himself as the wedding god in therapy sessions. For the Pratt family, no justice could restore what was stolen. James Holloway, the groom who never got to say "I do," has retreated from public life entirely. Thank you for joining us for this examination of how ambition twisted into violence. If you found this story compelling, please consider subscribing to True Crime Inquiry for more in-depth examinations of the human psyche at its darkest. Your comments help us understand which cases resonate with you, and every like extends our reach. Until next time, remember that behind every perfect facade may lie imperfect truth.